Should you talk on stage between pieces in a classical music concert? Hello everyone. Today is March 21st, 2023. It's Tuesday. It's Harp Tuesday. And today I want to talk about that idea. So I'm just back from a tour and that got me thinking because I almost always, when I'm performing in an English-speaking country, I will at least introduce the pieces to at least say, next I'll be playing Fauré's Impromptu or whatever. But in classical music, there is certainly a school of thought that says not to talk between pieces. Maybe sort of an old school thought, but this idea that it's the music that's important and people don't come to hear you talk. And I have some, I think that's a reasonable thing to do as well. So I just wanted to explore that a little bit and talk about why I do talk between pieces. So in terms of that idea of not talking between pieces, I'm not sure when exactly it originated. I'd love to know, for example, Mozart with some of the music battles. Were people talking and introducing and yapping away between pieces? Or how about people like Liszt and Paganini, who certainly knew how to work an audience? Were they talking between pieces? But at least in the last century, there was sort of this idea potentially of classical music is you come on stage, you play your piece, clap, 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 bow, play the next piece, etc. And there's a certain attraction to that. Like, I don't mind that as an audience member because I'm quite familiar with classical music. I like that. I'm there for the music. And as a performer, there is a certain attraction to that because gives you the ability to focus completely on the piece. And classical music is often, extremely demanding, right? Thousands of notes, you're trying to place them at exactly the right time and place and volume and sound quality. And so you can just focus just on playing music. But as I say, I typically don't. I will at least talk a little bit between pieces. And so there are, I guess, 4 reasons why I might do that, and I'm going to talk about those in sort of order of importance. And the most important is that I think it helps create a better atmosphere, a friendlier, more inviting, sort of breaks that divide between the performer and the audience. And especially in classical music, I think classical music has a reputation, at least among some people, of being a little bit unapproachable or scary. And so I have lots to say about that. And it's not that I think we should be just the same as pop music or that everyone needs to listen to classical music or something. But it's worth being aware that if someone's at their very first classical music concert, they might be feeling a little bit uncertain. And I think by speaking, it makes it clear that I'm a human, you're a human, we're both here together. And as I say, kind of bridges that divide so that, okay, maybe I'm the one playing the music and you're the one listening, but in a sense, we're both listening. We're both sharing this experience of hearing this music. And I think it helps create a friendlier, more inviting and more inclusive atmosphere. Now, that's for the audience. I think also potentially for the performer as well. It helps maybe make you feel like, yeah, we're all here together to celebrate this music and enjoy it. And it's not that you need to speak a lot for that. As I say, even just simply saying, and so next I'm going to be playing Fauré's Impromptu, or next I'm going to be playing Handel's Concerto for Harp. And then you sit down and you play it. It just breaks the ice a little bit, breaks a little bit of that maybe barrier that's created between the performer and the audience. So that's the primary reason that I like to do it. And then the second reason, and is one that I was sort of really solidified, is as I'm reading a book right now called The Expectation Effect, which so far is a fascinating book. And it's talking about, of course, how our expectations can really alter how we experience something. So this expensive glass of wine tastes much better than this cheap glass of wine, even if they're both the same wine. And so, as I say, that kind of solidified, I think, what I kind of understood, but not consciously, this idea that sometimes by speaking, we can help the music be enjoyed more, right? Or make it more approachable. So to provide a roadmap of the piece, a sense of what is going to happen in the piece, or to set a mood for the piece. And I think we crave familiarity, right? We like to hear stuff that sounds at least similar to things we've heard before. And pieces that oftentimes maybe the first hearing of a piece can be amazing, like we can just be blown away if it's similar to other stuff we've heard, but it can also be a little bit much, and so that to have a sense of what's going to happen in the piece can help make it as if we've heard it once or twice before. And what I love about classical music, one of the things I love, is the sense of there's always a direction. From that first note, it's heading towards the end of the piece, right? There's this direction. And so I know where I'm going as a performer, but sometimes it's nice to give at least a little bit of a sense of what's going to happen to the audience, potentially. So I want to talk about the first three pieces that I played on this tour program. And so the first piece is Godefroy's Dance of the Sylphs. And when I introduced it, I would say something like this. Felix Godefroy was a Belgian harpist and composer who was quite famous in his time, the age of the Romantics. He toured around Europe performing and wrote most of the pieces that he played, including this first piece, his wonderful Dance of the Sylphs. And the piece itself starts with a fairly extended introduction. And then eventually we hear this beautiful little melody, this little dance. And eventually that leads to a very exciting bit. Then we return to the beautiful melody, and of course we end with a return to the exciting part. So I hope you will enjoy Godefroy's Dance of the Sylphs. So that bit, not so much about Godefroy, but that bit about the structure of the piece then provides a little bit of a roadmap when you're listening, because it is quite a long introduction. And I would say the Dance of the Sylphs is a fairly accessible piece, an easy piece to hear. It will sound familiar. If you're at all familiar with classical music, it's not going to sound too far out or anything. It's very much just a sort of Romantic era piece. But nice to kind of know what's going to happen, a little bit of a sense of what's going to happen, potentially. That can help make that experience more enjoyable as you listen to it. Of course, you can say, no spoilers, no spoilers. You don't want to know that it's going to end with an exciting bit. You want to maybe hope that you've heard it and it's now back to this little melody and you're expecting maybe it to end with an exciting part, but you don't know for sure. And again, I can sympathize with that. For me personally, I'm quite happy listening to something cold, but I've also heard so much music so that almost anything I hear is going to sound somewhat familiar. So I'll say that potentially that helps make it a little bit more inviting or a little bit more enjoyable to someone. Then the next piece was Jardin Moyer, one of my current favorites. And there I would say something along the lines of, this piece is based on a poem, and on the back of your program you'll see the original French poem and an English translation. And then in the music you'll really hear what the poem describes. The rain falling and dripping off the leaves, and this very sort of moody and melancholic atmosphere. It's one of my favorite pieces to play at the moment, and so I hope you will enjoy Jardin Moyer. Something along those lines. So here I'm not giving so much a roadmap necessarily, is setting a mood, a little bit of a sense of what the piece is, that I could, the piece does have a structure, and there's an exciting middle part I could mention or something like that. It gets louder and then it ends softer. But here I just wanted to kind of set the mood of, this kind of mysterious little walk through this garden in the rain. And again, this one is a more challenging piece to listen to. If you're not super familiar with classical music, this might sound a little more, it doesn't have like a real clear sort of melody type of thing. So again, I hope that little bit of introduction makes the piece sound more enjoyable or potentially adds to one's enjoyment listening to it then. And then the next piece was a Bach piece, one of the movements from a trio, organ trio sonata. And for that, I didn't at every concert, but I realized what I wanted to do was I wanted to sort of set people's expectations of what they were going to hear, because it's not. I'll throw a link up to a piano version of this. It's not necessarily a hard piece to listen to, but it doesn't have a lot of new things. So it's this beautiful Bach endless progression. I love the piece. It's a fantastic piece of music, but it's kind of long, in a sense of not sort of new material, new themes or something like that. And so after these first two pieces, where there is a fair amount of variety and what's going to happen next and what's going to happen next, I realized through the tour that I wanted to sort of set an expectation here of what you might hear and what sort of mood you might be in listening to it. So I would say something along the lines of, unlike the last piece, which told a story, this piece I think is more about just sitting back and enjoying this sort of endless Bach progression. Something like that. Just to kind of set that mood. Did that work? I don't know, but I like that idea. And so, as I say, that's one of the things that talking can do is kind of enhance someone's enjoyment of the music by just giving a little bit of a roadmap or a little bit of an idea of the mood or style of the piece, or maybe the mood that we should be in, the sort of place that we should be listening to it from, or could be listening to it from. And then the third rank of importance is talking between pieces can be entertaining. Now, again, are you there to listen to someone talk, or are you there to listen to them play? And someone's entertainment can be somebody else's, get on with the music. So it's a fine line, and again, different, like I think in the folk genre, for sure there's a tradition of talking, right? That's part of the performance. And you may not also be comfortable with trying to do sort of a talk as part of a story, or talk as part of the performance. But it can be a nice addition in some cases. So the last piece in the first half of the program, after those three pieces, was Deborah Hansen-Conant's Baroque Flamenco. And it has a story. She specifically writes out a story about it. And in my own words, then I have this story, and it's a real story. I tell it as a story, really, instead of sort of a conversational tone, more of a storytelling tone. This next piece has a story. It's the story about a guitar that's also a time machine, etc., etc. And I give you Baroque Flamenco. So for me, it's a really enjoyable thing, because I like hamming it up and I like telling a story. And I get a great response from the audience as well. And the piece itself is very accessible, but I think that story does add potentially to the enjoyment of the piece, and this awareness of we have this minuet in G minor and the contrast between that and the flamenco. Not all pieces, this is a particular piece that has a story in it. But again, some people will talk and it will be entertaining, and that's partly maybe what you come for. Again, in classical music, that does not tend to be the tradition. But anyway, that's just something to be aware of, that you can add some humor or some entertainment value to talking between pieces. And finally, and fourth in importance, and something I think to be a little bit careful of, is education, right? So it's very tempting, or it can be very tempting, depending on who you are, to like, there's lots of stuff one could talk about a piece, lots of stuff to share. And it's tempting to share too much of that, I think. So for example, that little spiel I did about Godefroy, I gave a little bit of a history, setting him in a time and place, and he's out there performing, famous, blah, 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 blah. That might add a little bit to your enjoyment. And again, I think some people really do crave, like, what is this piece about? Or want to know more about it. And other people might not care. They just want to hear the music, right? I don't want to know anything about the context. I just want to experience the music. So I think it's a fine line. I would be really hesitant about focusing too much on education. I think program notes are the appropriate place for that, right? If you want to do a lot about the history of the piece and the time, who the composer was, where they were in their life when they're writing this, the sort of the context, the wider context of what's going on in the world, and other composers, blah, blah, blah. There's all this stuff one can talk about, and it's potentially very fascinating and interesting, but better in a program note where someone can read or not, whether they wish, and it's much faster than somebody talking, is my feeling on that. So just being careful. So yeah, so there, as I say, are some reasons why I like to talk a little bit between pieces. And again, trying to keep it short. So I'm a big believer in short programs, in leaving people wanting more. And so again, to look at then the context of what you're performing and how much time you have. Sometimes maybe you have a specific time, or just in this case, I didn't have a time limit, but I had this program of music that I was playing, and looking at, okay, well, sometimes there's going to be somebody introducing you. There's going to be applause, hopefully, between pieces. So it's not just the length of the pieces themselves, there's all this extra time. And then how much time can you talk between pieces? How much does that all add up to? So certainly not too much time between pieces regardless of the entire time, but then also if I have a jam-packed program of a bunch of music I really, really want to play, but I'm feeling that already is like almost too long a program, I might not say anything except maybe like at the very beginning to again break the ice, kind of create that atmosphere. Or if I feel that I need to stretch out the time a little bit, that I want it to last a little bit longer, then I might indulge and speak a little bit longer. But again, not too much, because for me personally, I don't want to over talk. It's one thing if I'm just sitting here talking to you on YouTube, you can always turn me off. But in a concert, I think it's good to not talk too much. But I do like talking a little bit, and I think that can really invite an audience in and make the overall experience better. So I'm curious what you think. Have you had that experience of a concert where by somebody talking, it made the concert special? In general, do you like it when people talk between pieces or not? Do you talk between pieces if and when you perform? And and also, what do you think about that idea of talking between pieces also being able to kind of set our expectations of what we're about to hear, and that maybe help us enjoy a particular piece more? Or do you prefer to go into something cold and just listen and not know any context about it, because that can be really nice as well? So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that this sort of philosophical ramblings on. My goal here is to do a Harp Tuesday episode every week for a couple weeks to kind of catch up, because I missed some as I was touring. But we'll see how that goes. But I hope to see you next week. And in the meantime, have fun and take care. Cheers.